With version 2 being well underway and a myriad of new characters having been released, each one seemingly more powerful than the one that came before, team building has been advancing considerably in 2024 so far. We've had Black Swan usher damage over time, Sparkle literally push hypercarries past the limit, Acheron violating the Geneva Convention by being a weapon of mass destruction, Acheron and Robin finalizing follow-up attacks, and Boonhill and Imaginary Trailblazer pushing us into break damage. So many developments in such a short time, which is great in keeping the game interesting, but I can imagine all these meta-defining or meta-shattering characters coming out one after another is putting quite a hell of a lot of strain on people's budgets, especially free-to-plays. In light of that, the burning question on people's minds right now must be, what are the best teams to go for? That is what we'll address today. To say that Star Rail's endgame content sphere demands a lot more attention and planning than Genshin's would be an understatement. Come version 2.3, the new Apocalyptic Shadow game mode will be released, giving us a total of 4 endgame modes for players to explore, 3 of which, and the most important ones, being continuously updated with new content and therefore new challenges. Such fluctuations from one cycle to the next will naturally favor some units over others. For example, one pure fiction might make you wish you had Argenti, while another cycle suddenly Jingyuan is the man of the hour. The goal of this video is to, at least hopefully, give you the 5 teams most consistent and or essential for success. Mind you, the bar has been substantially raised compared to what we just had a few months ago. It's still too soon to ascertain if Star Rail will follow its predecessor's footsteps or if it will stabilize for the remainder of version 2. That being said, I seriously doubt any of these teams will fall out of relevance anytime soon. At most, they might have one character that needs to be replaced, but overall that's about it. I don't think Apoc Shadow will push any of these units out of relevance. If anything, it might make some of these teams even more essential. As per usual, I'd like to establish that just because a team or character is not featured in this video does not mean they're unviable. Despite Star Rail having a more challenging endgame than Genshin, it's still bounced around making plenty of units viable to clear. The focus of this video will be on meta resilience, as in can these teams handle MOC and or pure fiction, and then eventually Apoc Shadow regardless of what enemies appear or what blessings are in play. Obviously there's no team who can completely ignore blessings like in Genshin, but the more they can deal with it, the better. And finally, like always, this video is not ordered, it will just be 5. All that said and done, let's begin. Starting with the first team, we have Himeko and Herta, which I'll be referring to as Hertico. Under no circumstances will you ever find yourself using this team in MOC or Apoc Shadow, and because of that, some of you might find me crazy for including them. But believe me when I say, if you do not have this pair, pure fiction will be extremely, and I emphasize extremely arduous to 80k clear. I'm not exaggerating when I say with the advent of pure fiction, Himeko and Herta were the 2 most buffed characters in the entire game. Specifically, this little piece of shit went from arguably the worst character in the game to definitively the best unit for pure fiction, and it's not even close. The reason Herta and Himeko get paired up together should be common knowledge to everyone, but for the 2 of you not in the know, chaining Herta and Himeko together can activate each other's talents using their own. Each of their follow-up attacks damage all enemies in sight upon meeting a certain activation condition, with Herta's being anytime an enemy drops below half HP and Himeko's being achieving 3 weakness breaks. Hertico's main benefit comes from their ability to attack multiple times per turn cycle outside of their own action, and assuming an ideal scenario, they can even chain into each other endlessly, resulting in near effortless 1 cycle 40k completions. No other engine comes remotely close to the sheer dominance of these 2 units that until a stronger Herta and or Himeko comes out, you'll pretty much never not use them for one-sided pure fiction. This is a very rare case of a team being niched by functionality, but in that niche, they're so brainlessly overpowered it makes up for them sucking in MOC and Apoc Shadow. For the other 2 party slots, the goal is to run anyone capable of boosting damage for both of them or playing off their ability to strike several times in a single round. If survival is a point of concern, the best tank is hands down Acheron, as he can generate tons of blind bed points with those 2 in play. For buffers, you can get by on anyone really, but the optimal choice would be the 2 members of the Holy Support Trinity capable of buffing double carry engines, Runmei and Robin. If you're missing one or both, Asta's not a bad choice, as she can amplify the fire damage of Himeko while boosting everyone's speed. Supports that increase follow-up attack damage like Topaz or break frequency will also be of great help for this team. Hands down a must-have for anyone who wants to complete pure fiction comfortably. The only downside is that while Herta is guaranteed, Himeko is not, so you have to unironically hope you lose a 50-50 to her unless you want to use her 300 pull 5-star select on her. Next profile will be Kafka Swan, easily one of the best teams in the game, and this time both in MOC and pure fiction. The beauty of this team, no pun intended, is that it's extremely consistent, capable of dealing huge amounts of damage per turn regardless of weakness type or number of enemies. Whether fighting one or several, you'll burn through them all the same. Since damage over time doesn't rely on crit stats, you can always expect them to perform at a minimum level, which happens to be quite high. Depending on who you ask, this can either be considered a very low cost endgame party or a very high one. Cost won't really be a point of concern for this video unless it entails ungodly amounts of whaling like E6S5, but I have heard people argue both sides of the story. The objective is to stack up as much of Black Swan's arcana on a target as possible, while also stacking as much damage over time on a target as possible. In a similar fashion to Herta, these two can build off each other, where Kafka can stack up arcana with Black Swan, who in turn allows Kafka to deal a ton of damage with her copy-paste mechanic. Technically, it's not obligatory to use Kafka alongside Black Swan, but Kafka is unambiguously the best driver at the moment for this team. Swan's Arcana stacks make her presently the only character capable of dealing AoE damage over time, as the Arcana stacks deal blast damage if there are at least 3 on the primary target. Said explosion can then spread Arcana stacks to the adjacent targets, which means you can chain explode damage over time on everyone. Couple that with both Kafka and Swan's ultimates being AoE, they can clear one-sided pure fiction with very little effort. As for when taking on a single, more powerful enemy, the premise of Arcana entails you stacking as much as you can on a singular target. In other words, the original focus was on one target anyway, it just has a supplementary effect of blasting nearby enemies on the side. And when Kafka Swan teams begin stacking damage, all I can say is we can only imagine how broken this would be if damage over time could crit. Now, composition-wise, just like Herta, you want teammates who can ideally support both of them simultaneously. More emphatically in this case, given Kafka and Swan directly increase each other's damage. So in reality, you're strengthening them, who then strengthen each other on top of that. Once again, Ranmei or Robin's an obvious choice. They're interchangeable, but I think Robin might be a bit better in light of increasing attack. Better yet, just go both. Should you be lacking either of them, another dot user is sufficient. Sustain-wise, it's pretty much just Huohuo. She can battery both of them for more ults, give bonus attack to both of them for stronger dot damage, and is just overall very usable in general. This team has developed a sort of meme reputation for having a rather sultry lineup alongside an innocent child.
It should have been me, not him! It's not fair!
Anyways, if you're confident you don't need a sustain unit, people have sometimes just gone full damage Kafka Swan with Ranmei, Robin, or another dot user and destroyed everyone before they even took damage. Next team will be the IPC team, capitalizing on follow-up attacks on account of how much development it's received over time. The IPC team is named such due to the core members comprising the engine, Dr. Ratio, Topaz, and Aventurine. While this team has been achievable in version 2.1, it only recently came into full glory with the advent of Robin. I understand Robin's a member of the family, not the IPC, but regardless, this will be the only team in the game that effectively makes use of a triple carry composition, as it's actually worthwhile to run hybrid if not full damage on Aventurine for optimal clearing. Naturally, you still want to get as much defense on him as you can, but most players want crit body and an imaginary damage orb after they reach his defense breakpoint. In any case, the goal of this team is to achieve as many follow-up attacks as humanly possible. As highlighted in last week's video on follow-ups, how it works is that once again, like Kafka Swan and Herta, each unit helps each other out, who in turn reciprocates. Aventurine's A6 trace can acquire 1 stack of blind bet anytime a follow-up attack is triggered by a party member equipped with this shield, eventually having him perform a follow-up attack of his own. Then when looking at Topaz's talent, anytime the enemy targeted by her skill gets hit by a follow-up attack, it accelerates Numby's action to where every 2 follow-up attacks, he gets to attack himself, which of course adds to Aventurine's count. While this is happening, both Topaz and Aventurine's respective debuffs increase Dr. Ratio's damage and rate of follow-ups, which ultimately increases the rate of Topaz and Aventurine's follow-ups together. Whether this intrinsic synergy between them was intentional or not, it's a genius move on Hoyo's part, as this is one of the newest top-tier squads in the game. Robin's inclusion rounds all of this out by granting everyone a massive boost in damage. What makes her more optimal than Ranmei for this team specifically is that she gives 25% more crit damage for follow-up attacks in addition to the base 20% crit damage on a talent. On top of that, since follow-up characters have the potential to attack multiple times per turn, they can get more use out of a single ultimate cast by her. At the same time, this works in her favor as she gains energy with each attack from her allies, so by the time her ultimate ends, there's a very big likelihood she can recast it right away. The IPC team is primarily single target oriented, which makes them ideal for MLC and likely a POC Shadow since the teaser hinted at the game mode being a boss battle, not a wave one. However, you can still use the IPC team for pure fiction with one simple change. You can swap out Ratio with either Herta or Himeko and there you go. Continue where you left off. Is it still considered the IPC team then? Who knows. Either way, follow-up attacks are here to stay. I will say though, one major downside of this team is of course, in line with Topaz and Aventurine's occupation, they make you pay a very heavy tax to play them, as they're arguably the most expensive team in the game on a baseline level. Team number 4 will be Acheron Hypercarry. By this point it should be firmly established that Acheron is the single best damage dealer in the game. Her scaling is off the charts, up to 60% bonus damage if there are 2 other Nihility members on a team, and then up to another 90% bonus damage based on Crimson Knot stacks. Compounding off that, her ultimate has some of the highest base damage in the game that strikes all enemies multiple times, breaks toughness regardless of weakness type, and ignores 20% of all type resistance. She's a walking nuke. The only stipulation behind her success is getting her ultimate primed as often as you can, which is easily doable with the right team of supports and ideally her signature light gun. What enables her to be a thoughtless choice for MC is very simple. Acheron can do so much damage, she can practically one-shot anyone, even if it's a single target. The same will likely apply for Apoc Shadow as well. But how does someone whose DPS is tied to their ultimate be a good choice for a pure fiction? Does she have a self-battery like Argenti? Not quite. A lot of it has to actually do with her technique that makes it so good in pure fiction. It deals a ton of damage to all enemies and breaks toughness regardless of weakness type, while also refreshing her ultimate more often and applying Crimson Knot to random targets. But the real kicker is that her technique activates at the start of every wave. As you know, PF is all about fighting wave after wave. Combining this with her personal weapon, she can sweep entire waves and prime her ultimate to be used again and again and again at record time. Acheron is a beast. She single-handedly warped the meta to allow units like Fire Trailblazer to be usable, while making Pela, who was a pretty underrated support before, to become the second most essential 4-star in the game. While Acheron can be used at base, for my money, literally, the real meat of her strength comes from E2S1, as it can free up your party to include Sparkle for even more ridiculous damage. Acheron, Sparkle, Pela, and Aventurine has quickly become my go-to party whenever I don't want to think about anything and just brute force my way through content. It's a bit of a whale strat, but the payoff is most certainly there. Acheron's pretty much the if she can't do it, no one can kind of character. That's how significant the gap is between her and the next best damage dealer, which leads us to our final team. Team number 5 is Lunai Danheng Hypercarry, operating off the same basic format as Acheron Hypercarry. Between him and Jingliu, I find the latter to be more consistent while the former has a higher ceiling. Before Sparkle, Danheng was applicably overshadowed by Jingliu given his SP cost was just too unsustainable for that time period. Now that we have Sparkle, Danheng is back to having the second highest overall damage output in the game. To be fair, Sparkle's a welcome addition to most parties, but her toolkit is pretty much a match made in heaven for Danny Boy over here, as it allows him to reliably always cast a level 4 basic attack every turn. In regards to playstyle and whatnot, the only thing you need to focus on is tapping into his 60% damage bonus from his talent before landing the finishing part of Fulgrim Leap. The easiest way to do this is to cast Ultimate first, which is 3 hits, which allows the final 4 attacks of his level 4 basic attack to deal full damage. Compared to Acheron Hypercarry, where you want to give her access to as many debuffs as you can for faster ultimates, for Danheng you want to prioritize the standard things. That means giving him all the energy, attack, crit damage, total damage, rest penetration, etc. that you have at your disposal. Because of this, you have an unexpectedly vast amount of support options for him, with his only obligatory pairing being Sparkle. In addition to affording him more SP than even he knows what to do with, your team deals bonus damage the more SP consumed, meaning Danheng can max out her talent and by extension ultimate faster than any other carry. Hypercarry supports like Tingyun are also a no-brainer. She can buff his damage considerably and battery him for faster ultimates, letting him cap out his DPS potential more frequently. All in all though, you want your team to be as close to SP efficient as possible, and you want to tailor your team to supporting its objective. Silver Wolf can be situationally good if you're fighting enemies without an imaginary weakness by default. Pela is a somewhat SP positive character with an AoE defense break. Hanya can function in place of Sparkle for SP generation, although the difference is pretty measurable, and sustain-wise, most top tiers are either SP efficient, positive, or Huohuo, who makes up for her SP usage with battery and buffs. Danheng gets to play with a wide variety of supports, so long as you plan out your rotations ahead of time. That is to say, he might be the least auto-battle friendly team on this list. So those are the 5 best teams in Honkai Star Rail at the current moment, at least in my humble opinion. Honorable mentions go to Jingliu Hypercarry, who like I said is very similar to Danheng, only she trades a bit of damage for greater consistency. The two are practically equal in strength more often than not, so you can swap between them based on convenience. Second honorable mention will be Mono Quantum, Seela's current team of choice. Though by most counts, Seela is nowhere near as dominant as she used to be, she's one of those units where in the situations you can use her, she's really good. And with Apoc Shadow having a focus on bosses, there's a high chance you might see her come back. The main conditions at Mono Quantum is completely non-negotiable. You need all 4 units for this body to be competitive, not a single substitution allowed. Also, some of you might be asking for a boot hill since he comes out really soon and by extension break teams, but at the current moment we have only Harmony Trailblazer and him, so it might be a while before we arrive to an informed conclusion for break teams. Let's just put a pin on that until maybe 2.3, 2.4. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, I'd appreciate it if you left a like and subscribed. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other Honkai Star Rail videos if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.